So I know I talk primarily about Halloween Horror Nights on this podcast, but there is another haunt that I'm just as passionate about as well, and that is Howl-O-Scream, specifically the one at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. There are so many icons that Howl-O-Scream has that I wish received just as much love as like the Halloween Horror Nights icons. You know, you've got the Usher, and you've got Jack, and most recently Dr. Oddfellow. But Howl-O-Scream has some really interesting characters, and that is what we're going to talk about today on Ghostly Swoosh. I'm going to tell you all about Howl-O-Scream's various icons. Before I talk about our first icon, let's talk about the origins of Howl-O-Scream Tampa Bay first. So Howl-O-Scream originally started as Spooky Safari in 1999. It was more family-oriented. They wanted to keep it at like a PG-13, and they had an attraction called the Haunted Jungle Trail. The following year, in 2000, Howl-O-Scream got its name and its first icon, who was Dr. Livingsdoom. He was like this evil, mad scientist, jungle explorer kind of character who served as the tour guide through the Haunted Jungle Trail. He was portrayed by one of the original creators of Howl-O-Scream, Scott Swenson, and I think that's pretty much all of my knowledge on Dr. Livingsdoom. 2001's icons. There were 3 of them: Torment, Mangler, and Pernicia Gloom. I wasn't able to find any pictures of these characters, but the website bgthistory.com, which is a website dedicated to preserving and sharing the history of Busch Gardens, Tampa, has some brief descriptions of them. So Torment was a creature spawned from evil, responding to the voices in his head with violent and erratic outbursts. The Mangler was a creation of Torment, a guest of Howl-O-Scream 2000 named Frank, who didn't make it out of the park. The half-man, half-creature was forced to roam the park with 2 hooded keepers keeping him in chains. The last icon, Pernicia Gloom, took inspiration from characters like Elvira and Morticia Adams, combining sexy and scary with red hair, curvy lines, and tight clothing made from the skin of her victims. At some point during the event, they had to change Pernicia Gloom's look because it was too, risque for parkgoers. I would have loved to see either look, but unfortunately, there's nothing. 2002's icon was Death Spirit. He was a walking African zombie who could bring people back to life as animals. Not much else to say about Death Spirit, nor is there much else to say about 2003's icon, Fear, or F-E-A-R. He's like this goth vampire-looking man with red eyes and like a pale face and black lipstick and stuff, black hair. He's described as the maniacal controller of terror. 2004's icon was Hack. Not much is known about him other than he was an evil taxi cab driver who wouldn't allow his passengers from leaving his cab. 2005, it's kind of iffy whether or not to count this character as an icon. I think he's more of a mascot, but Howl-O-Scream does count him as an icon. He is just the Jack-in-the-Box. And that's pretty much all he is. He's just an evil Jack-in-the-Box in a kid's bedroom. The whole marketing campaign for 2005's Howl-O-Scream was pretty on point. It was really scary. The tagline was, "Your childhood fears don't go away, they just get worse." There was not an icon in 2006, but I do remember the advertising pretty well. It was like the hand laying on the ground with a cell phone, and it said "No one to trust." And the commercial that year involved somebody being attacked in an alleyway, I think. 2007, though, we have probably the first Howl-O-Scream icon with a pretty developed backstory, and that character is the Death Jockey. In 2007, on the event website, there was actually a comic book that would get updated once a week with 2 pages detailing the Death Jockey's backstory. It's actually still online. It's on a website called Issue, ISSUU, so you can still, look at it, thankfully. DJ was a misunderstood, aspiring musician born with a skin condition. They don't specify what skin condition. As a kid, he was bullied for wearing a special radiation suit outdoors because the sunlight bothered his skin. One night, while the Death Jockey was listening to his music, he was electrocuted by a thunderstorm, and the current, went through his headphones and burned off his ears. But he still wanted people to hear his music, so years later, He became the DJ of Club Muse, which was the setting for one of the houses in Howl-O-Scream 2007 After Hours. He vowed that everyone would hear his literally ear-splitting music. Like in the commercial, he plays the music so loud that people like bleed out of their ears. He would burn people with lights as well. Alright, so moving on to the Raven twins, Lara and Lana Raven. Lara and Lana Raven were born on October 20th, 1984. They were born conjoined at the frontal lobe of their skulls, and because of this, they lived in seclusion at their family estate. They became musical and dance prodigies while also developing a love for sewing. In August 2006, they met a plastic surgeon named Dr. Zachary Brockhouse, who denied their medical request to become separated following a psychiatric evaluation. The surgeon, along with dozens of other men, were later found with their faces mutilated along the Florida Turnpike with the Raven twins' blood on them. The twins were disgruntled that because they were conjoined, they had to travel everywhere together, and at one point they even fell in love with the same man. But, of course, people can be disgusting and mean, so this boyfriend called them freaks, and after years of being insulted by men for their being conjoined, the Raven twins couldn't get a surgery, so they smashed a mirror and used the glass shards to forcibly separate themselves from one another, which caused them to have even more of a facial disfigurement. And because of this, well, not because of it, but afterwards, they became serial killers that killed anybody who did not see them for who they really were inside. Beauty is skin deep. Now let's go on to 2009's event. Of course, as we know, in 2009, vampires were all the rage thanks to Twilight. So Howl-O-Scream took that opportunity to have vampire icons that year. And the icon was Miss Vane. She was a fashion designer who just so happened to be a vampire. She's been around since the Stone Ages, and she's always been seeking sacrifices for blood in order to remain young and beautiful. She loves to be the center of attention, as her name says, Miss Vane, and she loves to talk about her fashions with victims. Here's a cool thing about the costume design for that year's event. All of the models of the House of Vane had zippers integrated in their costume, so if you look carefully, you can see a zipper on every costume. Miss Vane also had models that hung around with her all the time. Their names were Anya, Elsa, and Eric. I actually had a crush on Eric. I'm not gonna lie, I did. The Howl-O-Scream website that year was so cool.
Ooh, I like you. You're just my type.
Looking for Miss Vane? You just missed her.
Okay, so sadly, this video of the House of Vane website only has Miss Vane's story, but I've done some Googling and found some information about the models as well. So Eric, he's described as the Don Juan, the womanizer, the one that all ladies love. I vaguely remember his blurb talking about how he used to be a warrior, or like a 17th century lord of some sort before Miss Vane turned him. Elsa, who's the auburn-haired one, is flirty, up for anything, known as the Baroness of Bohemia, and Anya, who's the blonde one, she's the bubbly Miami girl, kind of like a valley girl in her attitude. Anya and Elsa are both relatively new to the group, both strong-willed and elegant. We are all under Madame Vane. She is the founder, the leader, and the one who keeps us all in line. So the next icon we have to talk about is Sylvie, the lead singer of My Ex. So she used to be the girlfriend of Alex, who was the lead singer of a band called YX. Alex went missing one night after Sylvie caught word that he was cheating on her. Sylvie then took over YX, changing its name from YX to My Ex, and sung songs primarily about getting revenge. And Sylvie's big secret was that she actually murdered Alex after finding out that he was cheating on her. She now gets revenge on other men by taking them backstage after concerts and slicing their fingers off with guitar strings. So Sylvie had 3 songs that were available for download on the Howl-O-Scream website. Those songs were My Ex,
You're my yesterday, you're my goodbye. You're my light, baby, don't ask me why. You're my ex, you're my ex, you're my ex.
dead ringer.
Love, 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 love me until you're gone. Look right there, look, he thinks he loves me. My dead ringer.
And You Remind Me.
Remind me of someone I once knew. You remind me, you rewind me to a place so cruel.
And they're all bangers. Sylvie was interviewed for a lot of the press junkets and stuff. She made various media appearances, and she kind of had like this rock star attitude, especially when you brought up Alex and YX. She would get mad at the reporters and just like get up and leave.
And this one is going to be, sorry to go back to this, but I promised Matt that I would. I promised that I would, and he'll be very angry if I don't. But he said that these fingers that came to the media in the mail, he keeps insisting that I ask you. He's just not buying the explanations.
I don't know who sent them out. It's a cruel joke. And you know, I'm done. I'm done. That's just ridiculous. I'm out.
And they also had a show at Howl-O-Scream that year, a My Ex show, and she performed every night. Now that is dedication. Sylvie also had her own haunted house that year. It was called My Ex Revenge Rocks, and it followed the backstory of Sylvie and my ex. 2011, like 2005 with the Jack in the Box, they didn't have like a named, specified icon. It was more so just a character they used for marketing. She was known as the Lady of the Gardens. She's this pale, blonde zombie lady who dwelled within the dark side of the gardens. She doesn't have a backstory, so I can't tell you much about her. Moving on to 2012, this is my favorite Howl-O-Scream icon just because of like the personal connection I have with this character. It is the Trickster, or just Trickster. Sometimes I hear him referred to as the Trickster, other times just Trickster, either or. Not much is known about Trickster officially, but by watching his commercial and seeing like his photographs and stuff, you can kind of come up with your own conclusions. So what I've come up with is that he was the grave digger for the dark side of the gardens, and he holds this golden key. It has a 13 inscribed on it, and he uses the key to lure in victims that he later buries alive. If you look at a couple of pictures of Trickster from 2012, he has that clown mask that he wears. And I've actually worn the mask myself in Crash Test Clowns for one night. It looks like in this picture he has like a skin deformity, like by his hairline almost. So maybe he wears it to hide deformities, I don't know. There was, on Facebook in 2012, there was a game that you could play where you had to sacrifice your friends to the Trickster. It was kind of like choosing which one lives and which one dies. But a couple of, like if you watch this video, there were like, you could pick up more of the Trickster's story. He lived in like this shed fabricating masks for his victims to wear. And one of his lines was, "Who will wear my face with me?" I remember he said in like this creepy way. And then at the end of the video, you see that he's made a new version of like his clown mask that he wears. And then he says, "I made it just for you." And that's when you had to pick which friend got the mask or who died or whatever. But yeah, no, that video seems to be gone, but it's a good thing I've seen it so many times that I remember what was in it. In 2012's event, Trickster was in the family plot scare zone at the front of the park. It was like a graveyard-themed scare zone. He pretended to be a statue. He was wearing a hooded cloak, and every so often he would come alive and scare the crap out of people. And then in 2019, Trickster was made like the face of Howl-O-Scream. He was all over the billboards and the commercials and everything. He's actually in the commercial for 2019's 20th anniversary event. He's the one who unleashes the past icons to wreak havoc on park guests. Alright, so our next icons, yep, icons plural. Also the reason why I made this lore deep dive, just me talking as opposed to writing a script, we have the 13. So the deal was on the website for Howl-O-Scream that year, they had 13 doors, and throughout July and August, every couple of days or so, one of the doors would open, revealing the 13. So let's go ahead and talk about all of the 13 icons. Some of them have more backstory than the others. So we have number 1, who is the possessed. She's the possessed girl. There's not much to her character. Number 2 is the torturer. He's wearing this like black leather suit, and he's got one of those crazy masks with the nails in it. Number 2, the torturer, was in a scare zone called Pain Lane, along with number 12, the hangman. Number 3 is the hunter. He has a bow and arrow and a knife, as well as a necklace of ears. Number 4 is the butcher, and this is one of the characters that does have somewhat of a backstory. I'll go ahead and read it for you here. Mama's always been proud of her son, the butcher. He's always been there to protect her and help with the family business. But all that chopping has kept him from finding a love of his own. Ugh. Now he's looking for someone, and he'd love to hack his way into your heart. Are you ready to meet your fate? And it says meet like M-E-A-T. Apparently he was in a house called the basement. So number 5 is the Banshee. She's this all-white woman with blood coming out of her eyes, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs. She's not one of the icons that has a more elaborate backstory, but this next one, number 6, the Voodoo Queen, she does, and I'll go ahead and read her backstory to you. Desiree Yanes came home one night and found her husband with another woman. Enraged, she ran off and disappeared into the dark swamplands of Louisiana. There, she crafted voodoo dolls and swore then to torment them with unspeakably sadistic tortures. The Voodoo Queen continues to hide in the swamps of the bayou and perform her twisted voodoo rituals for others seeking revenge. Brave souls can test their fate at the new house, Deathwater Bayou, where the number 6 Voodoo Queen mystically transforms lost wanderers into her minions of evil with black magic. Here, her night servants roam with a zombie-like hunger and seek to grow her collection. The darkest evils lurk in shadows. Get out before you fall victim to her spell. Number 7 is the Surgeon. She was in the experiment house, where she worked with researchers to challenge fear tolerance and mental endurance in the interactive experience. Oh yeah, I guess it was kind of like the Alone house. Number 8 is the Demon. And then number 9, the Zombie, was in the zombie mortuary house that year. Number 10 is the Cannibal. Number 11 is a character called the Psychopath. Number 12 is the Hangman. And 13, the Clown. 2014's event didn't have proper icons or just an icon, but the theme was cursed. Don't listen. There were these like bald, zombie-looking characters that were victims of a curse brought on by a haunted song, and that song was called Feel the Darkness Rise, and you can actually listen to it on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever. The theme goes is that there is a curse sweeping the nation, appearing on phones, internet, and television alike, and once you've heard it, you're cursed, and the only way to break the curse is to survive a night at Howl-O-Scream. 2015's event, the icon was Scarlett Woods, and here's where I recommend you listen to the episode of Scream Pod that I guested on, where we talk about all things Scarlet and Unearthed. So Scarlett was a healer in an 1800s village along with her husband, and one day the wife of a village elder was sent to their home to be cared for, but the woman died in their care. The townfolk accused Scarlett and her husband of killing the wife of the village elder. So Scarlett's husband was tortured, his eyes were cut out, because the villagers thought that he was giving them the evil eye. And then Scarlett turned to dark magic as a form of revenge, killing everybody one by one until they all disappeared. She had these casting cards that she used to summon past evils to do her bidding, and some of those past evils were, appropriately so, past characters from Howl-O-Scream, like the Trickster and Jack, the icon from Howl-O-Scream Williamsburg. Another town heard of Scarlett's turn to evil, so they boarded up her house and buried Scarlett in it to prevent her evil from spreading. 200 years later, there was a construction crew that found the home underneath Gwazi at Busch Gardens. So ARA, which stands for the American Underground Research and Archaeology Team, they were brought in to investigate the finding of this mysterious home, and it turns out it was Scarlett's home. A crew member went down to see if there was anything of value inside the house. They found Scarlett, who woke up and killed the guy. So now her home is open for the world to find once again. Scarlett is awake, and she had a new mission to collect body parts to resurrect her dead husband. From 2016 onwards, it's kind of, there's more so mascots than icons. They're not like thoroughly developed characters. Okay, so I take that back. There was an icon in 2016's event. His name was Mr. Carver. He was famous for his handcrafted puppets, marionettes, and ventriloquist dolls that were featured in his House of Dolls. Mr. Carver was more prevalent in Busch Gardens Williamsburg's Howl-O-Scream event. In Tampa's, he was not seen at all. In 2017, again, we have these characters that I don't know if we could consider them proper icons. There's a Butcher character. This is not to be confused with the same Butcher character from the 13, number 4. This is a totally different character. There's not much known about him. He might have a connection to the carnivorous maniacs of the meat market, which was one of the scare zones in 2017's event. Maybe he's related to Simon from Simon's Slaughterhouse, which was a house they had in 2018 and 2019. Nothing else to say about him. 2017's event also had a bellhop character. Again, he doesn't have a name. I don't know that much about him. Obviously, he has a connection with the Motel Hell House they had that year. And then we're on to 2018. Again, I don't think this character counts as a proper icon, but she was on a lot of the marketing in 2018. She was this like Dia de los Muertos character. Her name was Maria the Matriarch, and she was the leader of souls celebrating the Day of the Dead in that scare zone they had for a couple of years. 2021's event, we're skipping over 2020 because, you know, that was the COVID year and they did not have an icon. 2021's event, I don't think had like a proper icon, but they did put the Witch of the Woods in a lot of the marketing. And then finally, for 2022's event, this character was on a lot of the posters and commercials and stuff, but again, it's really iffy to say whether or not if some characters count as icons or not. Anyway, this character's name is the game show host, but he did actually have like a proper name. His name was Charlie, and he was the host of the 50-50 Choose Your Fate show. No matter your choice, he wins and you lose. Join the game show host as he decides your fate and experience the fright of a lifetime. This year's event doesn't really seem to have an icon character. If you go on the website, they do highlight D.H. Bagham's Circus of Fear with like this carny looking character, but that doesn't count. But other than that, that is all of the icons that have been seen at Howl-O-Scream at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay. If you made it this far into the episode, I hope you've learned something new about these underappreciated haunt characters. Like, yes, I know most of Howl-O-Scream Icons' backstories aren't as fleshed out and intricate as the Halloween Horror Nights Icons' backstories are. Again, I have to say that these characters deserve some love too. They've been in the shadows for so long. I feel some of them should be just as revered as the Halloween Horror Nights icon. Thanks for listening to the Ghostly Swoosh podcast. If you'd like to support me and my podcast, why don't you consider buying me a cup of coffee? Go to ko-fi.com/theusherette. You can also follow Ghostly Swoosh at its new Twitter account at GhostSwooshPod, and my socials at theusherette19 on Twitter and theusherette on Instagram and TikTok. That'll do it for today's episode. See you, everyone.